Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be diving right into my favorite spec, the Outlaw Rogue. We'll be going over everything that is new with Outlaw for PvE content in the pre-patch and showing you guys a little bit on what are some of the best stats and some of the best setups that you can play with your Outlaw Rogue right now, whether you're going for raids or Mythic Plus content. Anyway, without further ado, let's just dive right into the spec. So first of all, how well is Outlaw Rogue doing right now? I would say it's a decent spec. It's a bit of a middle of the pack right now in single target for raiding. It's doing pretty well for AoE component and Mythic Pluses and seems to be quite competitive, especially with all the different target caps that have happened to a variety of classes, including for Outlaw, leaving us with only 5 targets to hit, unless we do something cheesy with our talents. Now, the spec I think is in a pretty good spot. It's definitely not the worst, but I won't really say it's really top tier in at least raiding for pure single target. I will probably leave that to majority of the casters. But in Mythic Pluses, where it's a varied situation of single target with bosses and variety of different AoE with trashback to trashback, we end up doing quite well in that department. Overall, we end up feeling a much faster of a spec in terms of our playstyle and rotation, and it feels pretty good to play overall. Now let's talk a bit about our stats and gearing. With this change with pre-patch, your secondary stats I feel like are going to matter a little bit less, at least in the sims that I've done. So these are just my numbers. These might be different for you. Of course, sim everything to infinity to get the most details out of things. But for me, I would say that if you're looking for secondary stats, versatility is slightly ahead of critical strike. Mastery and haste, I would actually say they're much closer than most of you think because of the diminishing returns with stats now. Meaning if you have too much of a one secondary stat, the more stat you stack of it, the less good it becomes when you hit certain thresholds. So secondary stats in general are a lot closer to one another, and just about everything is good now because, well, eventually you start getting diminishing returns and things, so somebody else floats to the top. But the best stat that you will want to stack for your Outlaw is agility. That means any kind of gear that's an upgrade that gives you agility is huge, even if it doesn't have your best secondary stats. Of course, you can sim your character, but the general rule of thumb going into this pre-patch, if it gives you more agility, it's probably better for you, unless you're just some kind of a class that's a haste fiend, or maybe a crit fiend, or something like that. There's maybe a couple specs here and there that are all about that one stat, but agility ends up being so good that you might even want a gem for it. For example, in my bracers, I have Leviathan's Eye gem that gives you extra agility. In my gloves, I have the Kraken Eye that gives you even more agility, and some people are even cheesing even more agility gems just to get the most agility out of the character, as agility is a raw increase to all damage output, like it should be, but secondary stats with BFA really start to fly off the handle as primary stats became so much worse, and generally happens with every expansion. But we're now enjoy the fact that general agility means just about any piece of gear that gives you more of it is an upgrade for you, even if it doesn't have the craziest secondary stats. Outside of that, the rest of my gear is going to be mostly versed because I'm trying to stay around 30% crit. For some reason, if I go below 30%, the sim websites start to whine and complain at me, so I try to stay at about 30ish% crit. For trinkets, I'll run the Ashvin Razor Coral and or Deadeye Spyglass. There are a couple other trinkets that are decent as well for Outlaw Rogues, but those are the two that would be the best for pure single target raiding. For my traits, Heart of Darkness ends up being my best trait, so I triple stack it in my gear. So if you have any gear from Neolotha, triple Heart of Darkness seems to be the way to go. But it's also because of the traits are going to be really different because of the scaling for rogues. Sinister Strike ends up being quite a bit of my damage now because of the way it scales. Pistol Shot, not as much, so traits like Deadshot are not as good. So Heart of Darkness ends up being kind of like a hit-all trait that works for all content, single target or AoE. Because we're on the topic of scaling, Keep Your Wits About You ends up being better because extra damage for Sinister Strikes. It's also really good for AoE, especially in cleave fights. Having at least one of those on your Outlaw is a good idea. It's not that much of a DPS loss on single target, and it's actually a huge DPS gain if there's any cleave at some point in the fight. So having Keep Your Wits About You as an Outlaw is generally a good strategy. Asip Your Sleeve is another good trait. I sim my character, that ends up being a decent one to at least bring one of in your gear. And I also run that together with the Brigand's Blitz. It ends up being a pretty good trait as well. The extra haze gives you like a bloodlusty effect as well, which is also pretty good because of the extra auto attack damage that you get to do with Slice and Dice being back in the game. It ends up being a decent kind of hit-all trade that actually works pretty good in AoE as well. So trades like Deadshot have become a lot less good, but they're still decent if that's all you have in your gear. The problem with Deadshot is Pistol Shot doesn't scale nearly as well, but also Between the Eyes has a longer cooldown now, so you won't be able to get Deadshot nearly as often. So best to same your character, but if you want to do what I do for raiding, I would say Heart of Darkness, triple stack is probably the way to go. For your talents, I would go with Ghostly Strike, Acrobatic Strikes, Deeper Stratagem, Cheat Death, Prey on the Weak, Alacrity, and Killing Spree. Those would be the best so for single target. Depending on your gear, it might be a little different. Of course, you can sim yourself to hell if you want to, but these are the best ones that would run for pure single target. With your essences for single target, Condensed Life Force is still the best choice. The Rock Boy really does do quite a bit of damage. Memory of Lucid Dream, together with Crucible Flame as well as Reaping Flame passives, is generally what's good for most rogues, and it works out pretty well for Outlaw in single target as well. So what is your rotation and playstyle for single target? First of all, put your poisons on. This is going to be weird, but maintain your poisons. Your instant poison is about, what, 5% of your damage or so, which is huge. It's super weird. Makes you think like you're an Assassination rogue or something. Next, pop into stealth, as you'll always be opening with ambush every single time. Third, roll the bones before you go in to get yourself a buff, since this is it's on the cooldown but doesn't cost any common points, just 25 energy. Cooldown reduction element also does let you get it back faster. We're gonna open up with an ambush, Ghost Strike, get the Rock Boy out, pop a Drone Rush, put up Coral, build up common points. I'm doing this very slowly for you, into a Between the Eyes. Then we'll build up common points into a Slice and Dice. And now we are ready. Vanish and ambushes are very much wanted for this playstyle. Maintain Roll the Bones at all times. Maintain Ghost Strike as best as you can. And try to save your Coral until the next time you have a Drone Rush. And that's going to be mostly the playstyle. Now, when you use Killing Spree whenever you have not a lot of energy on you. So if you're full of energy all the time, make sure to press Sinister Strikes, make sure to get your all your abilities out of the way ASAP. But when you're low on energy, use Killing Spree in order to be able to get yourself quite a bit of damage, but also so you're not overcapping on energy. So Killing Spree is very much a filler ability. Try to go for 6 common point finishers if at all possible. It should be a little bit easier with the chain. Well, playing Ghost Strike, you have a slightly different Pistol Shot playstyle, so it only generates 1 common point, which for many of you, myself included, it's a really weird playstyle change. And that's really about it. If an ability is lighting up for you, like if Ghost Strike is not on cooldown, press it. If Between the Eyes is not on cooldown, press it. Roll the Bones. Funny enough, you can get 5 buffs of them. So there goes my 5 buff Roll the Bones, which can still happen in this expansion, which is interesting. With Roll the Bones, you can still go by the same theory of reroll strategy as before. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some more meta strategies down the line, as this stuff is just got added into the game. But I think generally your crit buff is a good buff. For single target Skull and Crossbones, I would say it's pretty good. Broadside is pretty good for single target as well. So if you really need to re-roll for a buff, I would re-roll and maintain those 3 buffs for as long as possible. But in most cases, it's not a bad idea for Outlaw to just put up a Roll the Bones buff and just keep it there and play with whatever you get. It's not the end of the world, and there's probably a bit more meta playstyle to it. I know. But if you end up just keeping a buff on you, as long as Slice and Dice is there and as long as you're getting those auto attacks in there, you should be fine for the most part. So I wouldn't stress it too much, especially if you're first getting into Outlaw. And join the Rogue Discord when you can. The Rogue Discord is a very helpful place, Ravenhold. Or join my Discord rather, as I'll have more updates on these reroll logic if there is a better reroll logic down the line. But it's basically, it will take some aspects of the old school version of the gameplay that you had from the BFA and try to apply it here with a couple changes. Maintain Slice and Dice, and you can there's actually Roll the Bones buff, Grand Melee, that as you spend finishers into other abilities, you gain 2 seconds of Slice and Dice. So you can actually have 2 minutes with the Slice and Dice, or 3 minutes, or even 6, which is kind of hilarious when it happens. So that is something that's going to happen from time to time on your rogue. But yeah, this is going to be the single target playstyle rotation for your Outlaw, at least the general rotation. I wish I had True VGCD or some other add-on to show you my abilities that I used in the order that I use, but I don't have them. Nothing is working right now since it is very early pre-patch, but hopefully I went slow enough in rotation to get you the general idea. Next, let's talk a bit about how would you adjust your playstyle and talents for AoE. The playstyle is the easiest part. Let's talk about the gearing. I would just go for AoE trinkets. This one is really good with Thrown in a Jar. You can sim yourself. There's some decent trinket choices as well. In terms of traits, you can generally run the same thing you run for single target. But if you want to go Giga Mythic Plus boy, you could go as many keep your wits about you as possible. With Sinister Strike scaling as well as it does, and it does quite a bit of damage, more damage for your offense Sinister Strikes, and the fact that you can kind of spam it back and forth over and over together with keep your wits about you in AoE situation will create some giga damage. So when a stack crits or stack keep your wits about you and just spam Sinister Strike, just change your talents to from Ghost Strike to Weapon Master and you're good to go. But I would say Heart of Darkness is still really good. You are going to be doing single target in some of the dungeons as well, so you want to be able to have some decent boss damage. I would say mostly single target setup that I have right here, but if you want to just get more Heart of Darkness and like triple stack heart, triple stack keeps, you could totally do that as well. For talents, if you are going to be using keep your wits about you, of course Weapon Master is really good. If you can stack it like 2 or more, go Weapon Master. Outside of that, Quick Draw ends up being pretty good. It generates extra common points, decent damage, mostly good for the CP, the common points that you end up getting for it. But also, Blade Rush is pretty good. Blade Rush actually doesn't have any target cap. Killing Spree has target cap. Your Blade Flurry has target cap. Blade Rush has 0 target cap. Dance of Steel used to be good, but we don't really need the constant Blade Flurry. The 5% damage isn't worth anymore since we can maintain it almost all the time anyway without the need for Dance of Steel. So Blade Rush ends up being better, especially if you're going to be pulling more than 5 enemies around you, as most Mythic Pluses are still most likely going to end up doing just that. But that'll be the playstyle, or at least the changes that you would go for. The Azerite's essences would be a little different with Blood of the Enemy Major, and then I would swap out Vision of Perfection 4, Memory of Lucid Dream, and that'll be my setup. At least that's what Sims tell me is going to be the best combo. And the playstyle is going to be just exactly the same thing you did for single target. Just apply Blade Flurry. Same thing. Which I think we don't really need to go over at this point, because it's literally the same rotation, which is one of the easiest things of Outlaw. Again, make sure you have Poisons up and Crippling Poison, because that will actually be applied easier with Blade Flurry. So you'll be able to like AoE slow enemies, which might make Outlaw kind of interesting in terms of being able to slow enemies if you're going for like a cutting strategy with a Demon Hunter or something. But yeah, it's basically the same playstyle. Just use Blade between the Blood of the Enemy on cooldown as best as you can. Try to save it for trash packs, try to use it on bosses. The more of it you can use, the better. And the rest of the playstyle and rotation is going to be mostly the same. For Roll the Bones, I think the same buffs are good, minus the Skull and Crossbones, because, well, obviously you're going to be getting more procs and more chances to hit with Sinister Strikes with Keep Your Wits About You. So I would take exactly the same rotation theory that I talked about, minus the Skull and Crossbones. But that's really going to cut it right there. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about your experiences with Outlaw in the pre-patch. How you liking it? How you feeling about it? How do you like the change to the Roll of the Bones and the Blade Flurry and everything? I'd like to hear some of you guys' opinions. Do you enjoy playing the spec and like the changes that Blizzard has done for the pre-patch? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Give this video a like if you enjoy the stuff that I do, and subscribe if you haven't for more guides. Thank you all, and I'll see all of you in the next one.